A very good morning to all the students for the today's session. So in today's session I will be discussing about a very important concept as far as the production of jobs is concerned, that is introduction to capstan and turret lathes. Please see clearly on the screen construction and working of capstan lathe, construction and working of turret lathe, difference between the two, that is capstan and turret lathe. So before I proceed with the today's session, I will be just revising in the previous session we have discussed about whenever we want to carry out any type of job, especially the operations related to a lathe machine. So we require to understand the various components of it, like cutting speed, feed, depth of cut, their calculations, and the machining time. We have also discussed how to calculate the values of cutting speed, feed, and depth of cut, and also how a machining time is being calculated by taking some examples. And also we have defined in detail how an operator has to select his feed, depth of cut, depending upon the surface finish that he needs. So in the today's session I will be discussing about the capstan and turret lathe. So these as you are going to see on the screen, this introduction to capstan and turret lathe, as you are going to see, it is a midway development in the field of technology, where before the introduction of NC machines, numerical control machine tools, okay, which you are going to study in detail when you come for the 6th semester, before that and in between the lathe and that introduction, there is one more discovery, that is called as the capstan and turret lathes. So these lathes are considered to be very useful for mass production of identical jobs. Means suppose if the same design of a job, same type of job is to be produced in terms of thousands, then we can select these types of lathes. So that is the advantage of using capstan and turret lathes. So that is why we need to understand here now. Let us go to the introduction part. Capstan and turret lathes are production lathes used for production of large number of identical parts in minimum time. So how this is produced? This is a very important concept if at all you want to understand it clearly. So on a normal lathe machine, so we can do at a time only one operation. That means we require to hold the given workpiece in a headstock spindle chuck, and then we require to hold the tool in a tool post, okay, and then we are going to feed the cutting tool against the rotating workpiece. So only one operation is being done. So that means in a normal engine or center lathe, you can accommodate only one cutting tool at a time. But in case of capstan and turret lathes, more number of tools are being used on these types of machines. So that is why they are called as mass production of identical parts can be produced very easily. So that is what we are discussing with construction and working in comparison with the engine or center lathe. These lathes differ from engine lathe in the following respects. This is a very important concept as you need to understand here. They do not have tailstock, so you may find it very strange here. So we are going to replace the tailstock itself. The tailstock, which is located on a regular engine lathe to the right side of a lathe bed, it is being totally replaced. Okay, the workpiece is supported at the headstock and alone. That means the workpiece has to be supported in a headstock only as usual. The headstock is present on a capstan and turret lathes. Only thing is there is no presence of a tailstock. So that is how we are going to discuss in detail when I am going to start with the subsequent presentations. So they carry much larger number and variety of tools than engine lathe. So this is the plus point of these capstan and turret lathes. So in capstan and turret lathes, more than one tool. That means we can accommodate 6 tools, 8 tools, different tools, depending upon the number of operations to be carried out on a workpiece. More than one tool may be set to operate simultaneously. So the plus point of this is it is possible to see that every tool is being indexed. Indexing means or rotating. Okay. In a tool holder, the tool holder is made to rotate. That is also called as a tool turret. So which can be rotated, which is previously accommodated with the different cutting tools which are going to be used for the continuous sequence of operations. So what are the essential features? So when I am going to tell about the essential features means, so these are the common elements or the components of a capstan and turret lathe machines. So spindle is there, that definitely means spindle means that is a spindle of a headstock only. It is headstock is present, carriage is present, rear tool post is there. This is one of the extra component, rear tool post. That means generally in an engine lathe we are going to have what, only one tool post, that to the front side, okay, where the operator is working. Here one more is there, that is called as what, a rear tool post, means the tool post is located on the other side of the cross slide. You are also going to have a cross slide, you are going to have a slide or ram, this is also a new part. And hexagonal turret, this is also a new component being used by the replacement of the tailstock. Hexagonal turret is also used for accommodating the different types of tools. And square tool post on the cross slide, which is located at the, as usual, the how it is used in our regular engine or center lathe. So these are the different, we are going to call them as features because they are as good as the parts of a capstan and turret lathes also. So let us understand in brief the gist of the capstan lathe here. The turret of the capstan lathe, just I have told what is the meaning of a turret. The turret means a tool holder. In a regular engine or center lathe, the tool post is the tool holder. But in case of a capstan lathe, the turret, the name of the tool holder, we are going to name it as a turret. Okay, the turret of the capstan lathe machine is mounted on a slide or a ram. It is mounted on a slide where it is made to move, okay, or it is also called as a ram, which can be moved longitudinally on the saddle for feeding the tools. So whenever we want to see that this turret is made to move, so it is, the turret is made to move on a slide, and that entire portion is made to move on the saddle, SADDLE, for feeding of the tools, because this turret is going to carry out the different tools there. The saddle itself is mounted on the bed. So the saddle is mounted on the bed, so that on the that means it is possible to make it to move very smoothly from right side to the left side. Okay, the turret is generally hexagonal. Hexagonal means what? It is having the shape of the turret or turret head is of 6. That means it can accommodate 6 different tools. That is why it is made in the form of a hexagonal shape, but may also be square or round. That depends. Square, that means we can go for the even round with the slots. Circumferential also we can accommodate, or square, but generally it is made out of a hexagonal shape. Okay, this type of machine is lighter in construction and is suitable for machining bars up to 60 millimeter in diameter. These are some of the restrictions. So because we cannot go for the turning of a job above 60 millimeters, that is why the capstan lathe is lighter in construction. Okay, try to remember, because these questions will be asked in the assessment questions. Okay, so this type of machine is lighter in construction and is suitable for machining bars of up to 60 millimeters in diameter. Maximum diameter that can be turned or that can be machined on a capstan lathe is only 60 millimeter in diameter. More than one tool may be mounted on the same face on the turret, making it possible to machine more than one surface at the same time. So what he wants to say is, on the face of a turret where there is a slot is there, which we are discussing in the subsequent presentations, you will understand better. So we can accommodate more than one tool, so that it is possible to make more than one tool to come in contact with the workpiece, where it can be machined very easily. Now you can see very clearly here, just I have the same explanation. So try to see it very clearly. You are going to see very clearly the headstock, which is located to the left side of the lathe bed. You are also going to have a tool post, okay, a regular tool post, which is made to move, okay, along the feed rod, all the lead screw, both are there. It is there. And you are also going to have an hexagonal turret, which I have already told about that. This is called as an hexagonal turret. So this hexagonal turret is shown only the two-dimensional there. If you are going to see it clearly, you will be having 6 faces it is having surrounding. So 6 different tools can be mounted. You are also going to see the slots there. So these are called as the slots. So these are called as the slots, where there is an accommodation of different tools being held properly on a hexagonal tool head. And along with that, you are also going to see here the auxiliary slide. You are also going to see the auxiliary slide, and on this slide there is a movement of the tool post. The tool post is made to move. The tool post is made to, this is made to move in either directions, okay, on the auxiliary slide which you are going to see there. And this portion, this is called as the saddle, which is made to move completely towards the machining of the workpiece. Okay, this is how the construction is there for the capstan lathe. Okay, and let us understand about the capstan lathe parts again, the same one which we have already discussed, and we shall go in detail about that. See here, you are also going to have an headstock as usual. You are going to have the bed here, okay. Then also you are going to have a carriage, which is not shown here. Of course, it's coming here only in this portion. It's coming here, and you are also going to have a tool post, and you are going to have hexagonal turret, which is already I have given a presentation in the previous slide, and you are also going to have saddle for ram, lead screw, and ram, RAM. So all these are considered to be the different parts of a capstan lathe. Now let us go to the schematic diagram. Again, I am showing you in the form of a schematic diagram, because as you are going to see, because such questions will be asked in the examination, there is no need to write. You should be able to draw it neatly, the sketch of a capstan lathe in examinations. So as you are going to see the headstock, you are also going to see here the feed box. This is called an headstock with levers for operating, and here you are going to have a feed box, which is also going to have the gears to provide motion to the two important elements. That is, one is called as a lead screw, another one is called as a feed rod. Each one has its own function to perform whenever I want to engage the carriage. And it is also going to have a tool post. You are going to have an hexagonal turret, and also you are going to have a saddle for ram, where this portion is made to move in either directions as per the requirement. And what is the meaning of a turret lathe? So actually the capstan and turret lathes are almost same, with a very slight difference in the construction, which you are going to understand better when I am going to proceed with the presentations. The tool turret is mounted directly on the saddle, and the feed is given by moving the entire unit. The difference I want to say here, in case of a capstan lathe, the turret is mounted on a saddle or the ram, RAM, on which the turret is made to move longitudinally. But here the tool turret is directly mounted on the saddle, so it is possible to go for a higher diameter machining. That is very, very important here. So that is why turret lathe is more stronger than capstan lathe. Capstan lathe is lighter, it is used for lighter cuts, but definitely both are going to be used for the mass production of identical jobs, but whereas the turret can be used for heavy jobs, heavy cuts. Okay, that is the only difference. The turret lathe can thus operate under more severe conditions, accommodating heavier workpieces with higher cutting speeds, feeds, and depth of cut. Suppose if at all I want to give more depth of cut and higher cutting speeds, then I am going to select the turret lathe only. Turret lathes are capable of turning bars up to 200 mm diameter. The maximum diameter that it can machine is up to 200 mm using collets. That is called as a collet chuck, which we already discussed in our lathe machines as a part of work holding devices, as well as handling irregular jobs like casting and forging with chucks. So whenever I want to hold the castings and forge jobs, I can hold them directly on a chuck because they are not irregular in shapes. But even if it are irregular, it can be held firmly on these chucks. And as well as the collets can also be used for holding of the workpiece, which is having a circumferential slot, which we have already discussed in length while discussing about the work holding devices in the center or engine lathe. Some turret types lathes are equipped with crosswise movement of the hexagonal tool turret by hand or power. Even in some of the turret, what we are going to do, you are going to have the clockwise movement of the hexagonal turret, which we are going to discuss in the next presentations. Turret machines provided with so-called side-hung type carriage do not require any support from the rear side of the bed. There is no any requirement of the support as such. Okay, so let us understand here what is the difference. Okay, so there is no much difference because you are going to see the same parts here. Again, you are going to see very clearly here the headstock is there. Okay, and as usual you are going to have a lead screw and feed rod. You are going to have the cross slide, and you are also going to have the tool post. There is no difference. The same parts are also available on a capstan lathe. But whereas even hexagonal turret is also here as usual, but this entire portion is directly mounted on a saddle. You remember this hexagonal turret, just I wanted to clarify it. This hexagonal turret is directly mounted on a saddle. So in case of a capstan lathe, this hexagonal turret we used to mount on a ram. It is some slide was there, so there was the restrictions for the movement of the turret, which is having the cutting tools. That is the only difference between the two. That is why turret lathe is more stronger than the capstan lathe. Okay, now let us start with the next presentations, that is turret lathe parts. As you are going to see clearly, you are going to have an headstock, you are going to have a bed, you are going to have a feed box. So this is called as the feed box here. Okay, and then you are going to have a tool post as usual. Then you will be having a carriage. You'll be having a lead screw, feed rod, hexagonal turret, and the saddle. We don't have here RAM, RAM, or auxiliary slide. Auxiliary slide is missing here. What is that auxiliary slide? So this is the auxiliary slide. So this portion is missing. So this portion directly, this is mounted on this saddle only, which you are going to see clearly on the screen here. See here, it is missing there. That is why the hexagonal turret is directly mounted on the saddle, and it is possible to move this entire unit. That is the plus point of turret lathe. But in case of a capstan lathe, due to ram, it used to move only to a certain distance. So that can be avoided in case of a turret lathe by changing its design. Okay. This is again a schematic diagram. Observe clearly, which I have already told. Here you are going to have an headstock, feed box. You are having to have a lead screw, feed rod. Okay, you are going to have a carriage. Tool post is there. Hexagonal turret, which is directly mounted on the saddle here. Okay, that is the only difference between the two. Again, so this is a wonderful view of better understanding of the capstan and turret lathe. In both the cases, you are going to have a headstock as usual. Okay, and in case of a left side, I have shown it is named as a capstan lathe, or it is also another name for capstan lathe is called as a ram type lathe. Try to understand, it is called as a ram type lathe. Okay, such questions will be asked in the assessment questions. Capstan lathe are also called as a ram type lathe. Turret lathe is also called as a saddle type lathe. Why it is called like that? In a capstan lathe, the hexagonal turret is mounted on the ram, or it is also called as an auxiliary slide. But whereas in case of a turret lathe, the hexagonal turret is directly mounted on the saddle. That is the only difference. And in case of a capstan lathe, you are going to have the rear tool post. This is very, very important. So this is called as a rear tool post. So try to understand here, this is a rear tool post, and this is the front tool post, and this is the ram, and this is the turret head, which is made to move, as you are going to see very clearly with the arrow mark. So there is a restriction for the movement of this turret, hexagonal turret, which is indexed, as you are going to see here. Okay, so that these are the different parts which you are going to see clearly on a screen. So now let us come to the turret lathe. So in a turret lathe, you are going to have as usual hexagonal turret, but this entire portion is made to move. That is a plus point, so that it can be made to move to a longer distance compared to the capstan lathe. Okay, but here you are going to have only one tool. That is the only difference. But definitely compared to the capstan lathe, okay, the turret lathe are more stronger. It can be used for heavier cuts, and that is why it is heavy in construction. So that is the basic constructional difference between the two. Now let us go in detail about what are the differences between the capstan and turret lathe. It is light duty machine. This is very, very important. It is a light duty machine. That means only for small jobs. Diameter up to 60 millimeters can be machined, and we can go for only light cuts, not for heavier cuts. And in case of turret lathe, it can be used for a heavy duty machine. That means we can go for higher cutting speed, feed and depth of cut. In case of a capstan lathe, the turret head is mounted on the ram. Just I have told, the turret head is mounted on the ram, and the ram is mounted on the saddle. The ram is mounted on the saddle. The ram is going to have the slideways on its top. Okay, slideways means for moving, for giving the movement to the turret head. Okay, so that is why there is a restriction for the movement of that turret head. So the turret head is directly mounted on the saddle, and the saddle slides over the bedways. So here, first, in case of a capstan lathe, the turret head is mounted on the ram, and the ram is mounted on the saddle, and the saddle is made to move along the bedways. But whereas in turret lathe, the hexagonal turret is mounted, okay, directly on the saddle, and the entire saddle is made to move on the lathe bedways. The saddle will not be moved during the machining. So this is the, in case of machining, in case of a capstan lathe, the saddle is not made to move. Only we are going to make the movement for the hexagonal turret on the ram or the auxiliary slide. The saddle is mounted along with the turret head during machining. The saddle is moved, the saddle is moved along with the turret head during the machining in case of a turret lathe. So now the lengthwise movement of the turret is less. Definitely the lengthwise movement of the turret is less, because the turret is made to move directly on the, is made to move only on the ram or the slide. But whereas in case of a turret lathe, you are going to see the lengthwise movement of the turret is more. Why? Because the entire saddle is made to move along the bedways. Short workpieces only can be machined. In case of a capstan lathe, only short workpieces, the length of the workpiece to be machined is less compared to the turret lathe. Long workpieces can be machined in case of a turret lathe. Now it is easy to move the turret head as it slides over the ram, because it is very easy in case of a capstan lathe. But in case of a turret lathe, it is difficult to move the turret head along with the saddle. It may require certain skill there to move both of them. The turret head cannot be moved crosswise. So this is one of the major drawbacks of a capstan lathe. The turret head cannot be moved crosswise, means perpendicular to the workpiece. It cannot be made to move. But whereas the turret head can be moved crosswise in some turret lathes. In some turret lathes, it is the facility is there. So as the construction of a lathe is not rigid, heavy cut cannot be taken. This already I have told. We cannot take heavier cuts in case of a capstan lathe, but whereas in turret lathe we can go for, it is rigid and heavy, we can go for higher cuts. And the ninth difference is it is used for machining workpieces up to 60 millimeter diameter. Try to understand. We can go for machining of only 60 mm, and here it is used for machining workpieces up to 200 mm. Collet is used to hold the workpiece. Here jaw chuck is used to hold the workpiece. In case of capstan lathe, generally we use the collet chuck for holding the workpieces. That is why there is a restriction of the diameter. But whereas in case of a turret lathe, it is possible to use the jaw chucks, that is as usual headstock chucks on the headstock spindle here. Okay, so let us understand what are the advantages. Now we have learned so many points in connection with, in examination they can ask you compare capstan and turret lathes, or even they can ask what is the difference between the capstan and turret lathes also. That depends. So now let us understand what are the advantages of a turret over lathe, because definitely if you have concentrated on my presentation, you will understand the turret lathe is more stronger. It can take more heavier cuts. It can be used for larger diameter turning. Even it is possible to accommodate more length workpieces. So that is why the turret lathe is definitely stronger than capstan lathe. Okay, now we need to understand the same with its certain different points. Okay, advantages of turret lathe over capstan lathe. The turret is suitable for heavy and large jobs, which I already told. The longer workpiece can be machined. This is one of the major advantage. But whereas in case of your capstan lathe, we can go only for a shorter length. In case the third advantage of a turret lathe is it provides utmost support than capstan lathe. Why? It is supporting more rigidly because the hexagonal turret is directly mounted on the saddle and the saddle on the bedways. That is the only important significance of the turret lathe. It works under severe cutting conditions. So that is also there. That means we can go for heavier depth of cuts and longer, heavier cutting speed, high cutting speeds. Okay, capable of turning bars of diameter up to 200 mm. This I have already repeated third time now. It can be used for machining diameter of the workpiece that can machine is up to 200 mm. Larger stroke length than capstan lathe as it is mounted on the saddle. Definitely the stroke length means what here? The stroke length is nothing but making the movement of the hexagonal turret from right to the left side. That is called as the stroke length. It is more in case of your turret lathe, suitable for mass production. So basically, if you are going to compare, both are used for mass production of identical jobs only. Remember one important point here, capstan and turret lathes are also called as the semi-automatic lathes. Very, very important. They are called as semi-automatic lathes. So they are called as semi-automatic lathes because they are used for the production of mass production of identical jobs. If you compare both capstan and turret lathes are more preferable for mass production of identical jobs as it is having more rigidity, and it is possible to see that the jobs are produced very quickly compared to the capstan lathe. That is the only difference that you can have. So now let us understand about the frequently asked questions. So these answers for these questions are already available in the slide. The same portion will also be put in your Anthropic app. Please download it or note down it and write all the answers for these questions in a separate notebook. State the advantages of turret lathe over capstan lathe, remembering the 5 points you have to write minimum in examinations to get the 5 marks. Differentiate between the capstan and turret lathe. You differentiate. Just also we have discussed these 2 points are there as per the syllabus, but apart from that you need to understand the construction, working, and what are the advantages, what is the application, and all these things. And also every student has to write the assessment questions. Assessment questions is every student has to attend and every student has to write the assessment questions. So with this I am going to conclude the today's presentation. Along with this I am also going to join one of the important videos. Look into that.
Hi everyone, in this video we'll discuss comparison between capstan and turret lathe. Here I have drawn the diagrams of both the lathe machines. Here in capstan lathe, you will see turret head is mounted on cross slide called as ram, which is mounted on saddle. Where in turret lathe, the turret tool is directly mounted on saddle and they appears like a single unit. Here saddle is moved for providing feed to the tool, but in case of capstan lathe, saddle is fixed and ram is moved. Here the short stroke of ram have some limitation, so the capstan lathe is used for machining of small workpiece. Where in turret lathe, saddle is moved along entire length, so it is used for machining of large workpiece. And due to the heavy weight of large workpiece, turret lathe has slower operation, where capstan lathe has faster working operations because lighter in construction. Here the turret lathe is used to machine large workpiece, so large depth of cut and feed is provided for machining. Where in capstan lathe, less feed and less depth of cut is provided for machining because it is used for small workpiece. In turret lathe, power operated jaw chuck are used to hold the workpiece, where in case of capstan lathe, hand-operated correct chucks are used for holding the workpiece. In turret lathe, the turret is hexagonal, square or octagonal in shape and it can hold 4, 6 or 8 tools. Where in capstan lathe, the capstan head is only in hexagonal or circular shape and it can hold 6 tools through center of each hexagonal face. In turret lathe, the movement of turret is obtained by movement of saddle, where in capstan lathe, the star wheel provides movement of turret towards headstock. Capstan and turret lathe are both the machines used to produce large number of identical parts in minimum time interval and are used for mass production in less time with maximum accuracy and precision. These lathe machines are also called as semi-automatic lathe machines because machining process such as boring, drilling, thread cutting, facing, turning operations are to be done automatically, but the other functions like seating of tool, clamping of workpiece, cooling of processes are to be done manually. These lathe machines can be used to machine from small to large workpiece and are costlier than engine lathe because of having complex construction. So this is all about capstan and turret lathe.